Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. Zara stood at the edge of the grand balcony, looking out over the lush alien landscape of Xylar. It was breathtaking. Vibrant green forests stretched out across the horizon, vast rivers shimmered like molten silver, and the sky above was a swirling mix of purples and golds. This was no ordinary planet, and Zara knew it. The Xylarians had always been a mysterious species, a highly advanced civilization whose culture was as enigmatic as the world they called home. She had been briefed on their customs, their history, and their unyielding commitment to tradition. But none of that prepared her for this moment, the first direct contact between humans and the Xylarians. As the delegation's lead, Zara knew that the weight of this historic occasion rested squarely on her shoulders. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Zara, they are ready," said Liam, her assistant. He was standing just inside the doorway, his tone a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Right," Zara replied, straightening her uniform and taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." She followed Liam through the sprawling palace halls to the grand chamber where the Xylarians awaited them. The room was massive, its high ceilings supported by columns that seemed to stretch on forever, adorned with symbols Zara couldn't quite decipher. The Xylarians stood in a cluster at the far end, their iridescent skin shimmering in the soft light. Their bodies were unlike anything Zara had ever seen, tall and graceful, with multiple limbs extending from their torso in ways that seemed unnatural to human eyes. At the center was Kellar, the highest-ranking official among the Xylarians. He was tall even by their standards, his four arms poised in a way that suggested authority. His eyes, large and reflective, met Zara's with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Welcome, humans," Kellar's voice resonated through the chamber. It was melodic and calming, though Zara could sense an underlying wariness. She bowed slightly, following the appropriate formalities. "Thank you, Kellar, for welcoming us," Zara said, trying to sound confident despite the nervous energy bubbling inside her. The Xylarians responded by raising their arms, each in a different position, as though they were communicating a message she couldn't quite interpret. Zara and the others awkwardly mimicked the gesture, unsure of what they were doing. Kellar's gaze softened. "You are curious about us, yes?" His tone was less formal now, almost amused. Zara nodded. "Yes, we've studied your culture, but there's much that remains a mystery to us." A quiet chuckle rumbled from the depths of Kellar's chest. "Curious indeed. But you still do not understand. Do you?" Before Zara could respond, a low murmur rippled through the Xylarians. They moved forward, their multiple limbs extending toward the humans in slow, deliberate motions. Zara felt her heart race. She had read about this, the Xylarian greeting ceremony, where physical touch was used to convey respect, but no one had mentioned the complexity of it. Every limb of theirs seemed to have a specific role in this greeting. One Xylarian reached toward Zara's shoulder and instinctively she moved back. But before she could protest, another Xylarian touched her arm with a delicate, cool hand. It wasn't an invasive touch, it was firm and yet, it felt almost intimate. Zara froze. "Do not pull away," Kellar said softly. "You must allow the greeting to be complete." Zara's mind raced. "Complete? What do you?" Before she could finish her thought, a third Xylarian reached out, its limbs wrapping around her waist in a way that was both alarming and oddly comforting. She had no idea how to respond, her instincts at war with the strange yet undeniable connection forming between them. "Why do you touch us like this?" Zara asked, her voice strained. Kellar smiled. "Because it is how we understand each other. Our touch speaks louder than words." Zara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was not the greeting she had expected, but she was here to learn, to build a bridge between their cultures, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. She could only hope she could survive this first test of understanding. "You said." Zara stood in the quiet of her chambers, staring at her reflection in the polished metal surface. Her hands trembled as she tried to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. The feeling of multiple limbs, cool, firm, and unyielding, had left her unnerved. She had never felt anything like it before. No amount of training had prepared her for the depth of the cultural divide that had just been laid bare before her. The Xylarians, with their elegant, intricate touch, had seemed almost alien. She had been told that physical interaction was central to their society, a way of sharing emotion, intent, and respect, but no one had explained just how deeply ingrained it was in their culture. In human terms, it was like being thrust into a dance without knowing the steps, the rhythm, or even the music. Zara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could hear the distant murmur of her fellow humans in the hallway. They were no doubt feeling the same confusion. The ceremony had been strange for all of them. But none of them had been at the center of it. She was the one who had been touched, held, and guided through a ritual that felt more like an intimate exchange than a diplomatic gesture. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She quickly smoothed her uniform and opened it to find Liam, his usual bright demeanor dampened by the weight of the day's awkwardness. "Hey," Liam said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can we talk?" Zara stepped aside, allowing him into the room. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if to ensure no one else was listening. "We messed up. You saw it, right? The whole ceremony, that was weird. Even for us. I'm not sure what we were supposed to do." Zara chuckled, though it was more out of discomfort than humor. "We didn't exactly perform well. But I don't think it was about performing. I think it's about understanding. The Xylarians see touch as a bridge between minds. Each touch communicates something different. And I'm not sure we've even begun to scratch the surface of their customs." Liam winced. "I get that, but it was intimate. I mean, how do we even go forward with this after what happened? I'm not sure how to react, and I'm a little afraid I might offend them?" Zara finished his sentence. She sighed deeply, her hand pressing against the cool surface of the table beside her. "Yeah, I feel that too. I don't know what the right answer is. All I know is that we have to keep trying. We can't back out now." Liam nodded slowly. "Right. So, what's next? Do we just go back to the council tomorrow like nothing happened?" "No," Zara said firmly. "We need to understand more. I've already arranged for a one-on-one session with Kellar tomorrow. He said he would help me better understand their customs. I'll go deeper, see if we can get any closer to bridging the gap." Liam raised an eyebrow. "One-on-one with Kellar? That's a bold move. What exactly are you planning to do?" Zara paused, unsure herself. But then she squared her shoulders, her resolve hardening. "Whatever it takes. We can't let this misunderstanding be the end of it. The Xylarians might be distant and strange, but if we want to make this alliance work, we need to understand their culture. Really understand it. I don't think we've even scratched the surface." Liam stared at her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, if you think it's the best way forward. Just be careful, okay? These customs are different. If we mess up again, I don't think they'll be as understanding." Zara smiled weakly. "I'll be careful. Thanks, Liam." He gave her a thumbs up and left, leaving her to prepare for the next day's challenge. The following morning, Zara arrived at the council chamber early, her nerves still buzzing from the previous day's events. She had spent the night reviewing her notes, memorizing the few gestures she could recall from the ceremonial greeting. Yet even after hours of study she felt woefully unprepared. Nothing in the human curriculum on galactic diplomacy had ever included a practical guide to alien touch etiquette. When she entered the room, Kellar was already there, waiting. His multiple limbs were folded in a manner that suggested both patience and authority. His iridescent skin shimmered like a pool of liquid light, and his gaze seemed to pierce through her as if he could read her thoughts. "Zara, I see you've come alone," Kellar said, his voice smooth and calm, though there was an unmistakable undertone of amusement. "It is good. We will speak one-on-one today as you requested. Are you prepared?" Zara hesitated before nodding. "I believe so. But I need your help. I need to understand more about the why of your customs. Why touch? Why these gestures? I want to get it right. I want to connect with your people." Kellar regarded her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. "You seek understanding, not just knowledge. That is rare for humans. Few ever ask the why. They only seek the what." Zara felt a flush rise in her cheeks. I just want to do this the right way." Kellar's lips curved into a gentle smile. "You will learn. But remember, Zara, understanding comes from feeling, not just intellect. Your people think in binary, this or that. Our people think in continuum, in fluidity. What you call boundaries are meaningless to us. Touch is an expression of the continuum of our existence." Zara tried to follow his words, but the deeper he went, the more perplexing it became. "I'm not sure I understand." Kellar tilted his head. "Let me show you." With that, he extended one of his limbs toward her. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic. Zara's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she wanted to step back, to shy away from the approach. But she forced herself to stand still, to not let her human instincts take over. The Xylarian's hand hovered just above her arm before gently brushing against her skin. At first it was nothing more than a cool, feather-light touch. But then, as his other limbs moved closer, one resting gently on her shoulder, another on her lower back, Zara felt a surge of sensations she hadn't expected. She didn't just feel the touch, she felt everything. Memories, emotions, a sense of time stretching backward, forward, and all around her. These were the things that Kellar conveyed through his touch. They weren't just physical sensations. They were experiences, lives lived, thoughts shared. Zara's breath hitched as the overwhelming flood of information swept over her. She didn't know how to process it, but something deep inside her began to stir, an understanding that was more profound than any textbook could provide. Kellar's voice broke through the overwhelming sensations. This is how we know each other. Through touch, we share the continuity of existence. You see, Zara, it is not just an exchange, it is the creation of a bond. Zara, struggling to catch her breath, nodded slowly. She wasn't sure she understood fully, but she was beginning to realize that this was more than a cultural practice. It was a way of life, a way of seeing the universe. But there was still so much to learn. And Zara wasn't sure she was ready to experience it all. Zara woke to the soft hum of the ship's engines, the quiet hum of the meditative process filling her head as she reviewed her notes from the day before. She had spent a restless night attempting to come to terms with what Kellar had shown her. The tactile connection that had enveloped her had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. It had been as if every part of her body and mind had been flooded with images and emotions, unspoken histories and subtle nuances of existence that defied explanation. And yet, it was clear that Kellar's intention had been to open a gateway to deeper understanding. But there were so many layers to this culture, so many intricacies, that Zara wasn't sure she could uncover them all in a single visit. The reality of it was that the Xylarians did not view touch in the same way that humans did. For them, physical contact wasn't just a means of communication. It was a vital part of their identity and their relationship to the universe. The information shared through touch was vast, stretching across time and space, a continuum of thought, feeling, and history that humans could never truly comprehend. Zara had barely scratched the surface, but she was determined to learn more. She had to. The fate of the Human-Xylarian alliance depended on it. As the days passed, Zara's meetings with Kellar became more frequent. The Xylarian ambassador had begun to teach her the subtleties of their touch-based communication, showing her how to decipher the significance of each contact, the delicate patterns of motion and pressure that signaled different meanings. Some touches were calm and soothing, like a gentle brush against the skin, while others were firm, almost insistent, conveying messages of authority or desire. She learned that every touch, every gesture, was imbued with emotional and philosophical weight. The placement of a limb on the body, where it touched, how long it remained, conveyed the speaker's thoughts, memories, and desires in a way that words never could. It wasn't long before Zara began to notice that her own perceptions of touch were shifting. In the past, she had thought of physical contact as something primarily functional or emotional, something to be shared between friends, family, or lovers. But now, the weight of the Xylarian experience was starting to shift her understanding. She could almost feel the energy, the intelligence, within their touch, as though their very skin was alive with stories, ideas, and feelings that she could never hope to fully comprehend. Kellar noticed her growing curiosity, and one day he invited her to a special gathering. This time it wasn't just a diplomatic ceremony or an official meeting, it was an intimate lesson in the history of the Xylarians, one that would take place in a private space reserved only for their kind. Zara arrived at the designated chamber, a cool, open room with walls made of a material she didn't recognize, some kind of crystalline substance that shimmered in the light. The air was thick with the faint scent of something sweet and earthy, and the atmosphere was calm, almost dreamlike. Kellar stood in the center, waiting for her, his limbs gently moving in a fluid pattern, as though he were rehearsing some unseen dance. "Zara," Kellar greeted her with his customary calm voice. "You've come at a pivotal time. This is a place of great significance for. Today we will speak of the bond between all living things, the continuum of experience that binds us together." Zara nodded, feeling both nervous and intrigued. This was more than just a cultural exchange. This was an invitation to witness something fundamental to the Xylarian worldview, something that could unlock the mysteries of their entire species. Kellar extended his limbs toward her, gesturing for her to come closer. "Come. Let me show you the dance of the continuum." Zara stepped forward hesitantly, her heart racing. She had come to realize that the Xylarians didn't just view touch as a method of communication. They viewed it as a means of experiencing the world in a profound, interconnected way. The idea of touching wasn't limited to physical contact. It was the act of embracing the entire spectrum of experience, the emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual. Kellar's limbs reached toward her, each one following a unique path as they moved in tandem, each extending in a different direction, surrounding her in a careful, calculated choreography. She could feel the pressure of his touch on her skin, delicate yet purposeful. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that this wasn't just about the physical interaction. It was a reflection of the bond they shared, a thread connecting their consciousnesses. As Kellar moved, his limbs brushed against her back, her shoulders, her arms, each touch carrying a weight that transcended the physical. It was as though he was sharing his history with her, his thoughts, his experiences, his emotions. Memories of his ancestors, struggles, triumphs, the evolution of their species, all flowed through the delicate pressure of his limbs. It was overwhelming, and yet, Zara felt herself sinking into it, as though her body had become a conduit for something greater than herself. "I see it," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible as the flood of memories washed over her. "I see everything." Kellar's voice was soft but filled with emotion. "This is the continuum. The dance. It is not just a ritual, Zara. It is a way of understanding. By allowing touch to guide us, we can experience the fullness of life, the wisdom of our people, the pain of our losses, the joy of our triumphs. It is the fabric that binds us all together." Zara stood in the midst of this experience, feeling the weight of the Zalarian culture seep into her bones. It was as if she had become part of their consciousness, an integral thread in the tapestry of their existence. It was both exhilarating and humbling. For the first time in her life, she felt connected to something larger, something that transcended the boundaries of individual experience. It was as though she had crossed into a realm of pure understanding, a place where the lines between self and other no longer mattered. As the connection faded, Zara found herself standing in the center of the room, her breath coming in quick gasps. Kellar stepped back, his limbs settling into their usual posture. "What did you see?" he asked gently, his voice filled with quiet curiosity. Zara hesitated, unsure of how to explain what she had just experienced. I don't know. It was like I saw everything, every part of your people, every memory, every struggle. It was overwhelming but beautiful. I could feel your history, your essence in a way that words can't capture." Kellar nodded. "Yes, that is the continuum. We are not separate. We are all connected by the flow of time, experience, and emotion. We, and everything else in the universe, are part of this intricate web." Zara looked at him, awe and uncertainty mingling in her expression. "But what does that mean for us? For humans? Can we ever truly understand each other in the same way?" Kellar's gaze softened and he took a step closer. "It is not about becoming the same, Zara. It is about acknowledging the differences and learning from them. Understanding comes not from seeing things the same way, but from recognizing the value of the other perspective. Your people have much to teach us and we, in turn, have much to offer." Zara nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had entered this journey thinking that she needed to bridge the gap between two cultures, to create an understanding through logic and reasoning. But now, she realized that true understanding went beyond intellectual effort. It was about connection, about feeling, experiencing, and embracing the differences that made each species unique. The room fell into a comfortable silence as Zara and Kellar shared a moment of mutual respect. For the first time, Zara felt like she wasn't just a diplomat. She was a part of something greater, a link in the chain of a universe that was far more complex and interconnected than she had ever imagined. But there were still many more lessons to learn, many more mysteries to uncover. And Zara was determined to continue her journey, no matter how challenging it might become. The days following her encounter with Kellar in the Continuum Chamber were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Zara had never imagined the depths of connection that could exist between beings, let alone through something as seemingly simple as touch. Yet, every interaction with the Xylarians had deepened her understanding of their way of life. Touch was not just an act of physical communication, it was the lifeblood of their culture. It was how they shared history, wisdom, sorrow, and joy. It was how they lived. Yet, despite her growing empathy for the Xylarian worldview, doubts lingered. The unsettling question, which had been quietly tugging at the back of her mind since the first ceremony, resurfaced more frequently now. Could humans ever truly connect with the Xylarians on this level? Was it possible for them to bridge this vast chasm between cultures in a meaningful way? Zara found herself wrestling with these thoughts, unable to reconcile the intimacy of the Xylarian traditions with her own experiences as a human. She had come to accept that, for the Xylarians, touch was a gateway to understanding, a way of weaving their thoughts, memories, and feelings into a shared experience. But for her, and for the other humans involved in this alliance, it still felt alien. It felt like something they could never fully comprehend. One evening, after another of her private lessons with Kellar, Zara stood alone in her quarters, gazing out at the stars through the small viewport. The ship was in deep space now, far from the nearest habitable planet. A stillness surrounded her, and for the first time in days she felt disconnected. The vastness of the universe seemed so impersonal, like a cold expanse with no regard for the fragile beings that inhabited it. She needed answers. Zara's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her communicator. It was a message from Liam, her fellow diplomat and longtime friend. He had been quiet lately, seemingly as lost in thought as she was. But there was an urgency in the tone of his message. "Meet me in the observation room." Urgent? Zara frowned, but without hesitation, she left her quarters and made her way down the narrow corridor. When she arrived, Liam was already waiting. He was pacing back and forth, his face drawn with concern. "What's going on, Liam?" Zara asked, her heart quickening. "What's so urgent?" Liam looked up at her, his expression serious. "I think I've found something that might change everything." Zara raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" He motioned for her to follow him to the observation viewport, where they both stood gazing out at the infinite stretch of space. The stars were distant pinpricks of light, flickering against the void. But as Zara peered more closely, she noticed something strange. A large object was drifting just outside the reach of the ship's sensors. It was impossible to make out the details from this distance, but it was definitely not part of the natural surroundings. Liam's voice broke the silence. "I've been running scans on the nearby area. I've discovered something. It's a wreckage. An ancient vessel. One of their ships." Zara blinked in confusion. "A wreck? But that doesn't make sense. How could we have missed something that large?" Liam's face was grim. "It's not just any wreckage, Zara. It's Zalarian. From what I've gathered, it's been drifting out here for centuries, long before we even made contact with them. But what's worse is that this ship is tied to a piece of their history we don't know about. Something they've never mentioned." Zara's stomach tightened as the implications sank in. "You think the Xylarians have been hiding something?" "I'm not sure," Liam replied, his voice low. "But I think we need to investigate it. If this ship holds the key to understanding more about the Xylarians, about their past, it could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, it will give us a better idea of who they truly are." Zara felt a mix of unease and excitement. This was dangerous territory. Digging into the past of a species as enigmatic as the Xylarians could reveal things that were better left undiscovered. But it could also offer the answers she had been seeking. Answers that might allow humans to finally understand the true nature of their new allies. "What do you need me to do?" Zara asked, her voice steady despite the apprehension swirling inside her. Liam glanced at her, his expression hardening. "We need to get closer to that wreck. I've already initiated a course correction to bring us within range. If we can get some scans of the debris, we might be able to piece together what happened. But I'll need you to be the one to communicate with Kellar. He's the one who can provide the insights we need. If there's something he's been hiding, it could be the key to understanding what we've gotten ourselves into." Zara hesitated. She had already seen how connected the Xylarians were to their past. The weight of their history was embedded in every touch, every gesture, every conversation. If they were hiding something as fundamental as this wreck, it could unravel the fragile trust that had been built between them. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what might be revealed. But she knew one thing: this could not be ignored. "I'll speak to him," she said at last, her voice firm. "But if this ship is important to them, we need to tread carefully. I'm not sure how Kellar will react to this. He's already shown how much they value the continuity of their history. This could be a sensitive topic." Liam nodded. "I know. But we need to know the truth, Zara. We need to uncover what's in that wreckage. If we can understand it, maybe we can finally understand them." Later that day, Zara stood before Kellar in the ambassadorial chambers, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. She had already heard the rumors about the Xylarians' past, about an ancient war that had nearly wiped out their species, about secrets buried deep in their collective memory. But none of this had been confirmed by any of their official representatives. Kellar had always been calm, collected, as though their past was an open book, but she knew better now. No culture, no matter how advanced, could be free from hidden darkness. "Kellar," Zara began cautiously, "we've discovered something out here. A wreckage. A Xylarian ship. We believe it might be linked to something from your past, something you haven't shared with us." Kellar's eyes darkened slightly, his usually serene expression giving way to something unreadable. His limbs twitched as if preparing for something. "You have found it," he said softly, his voice distant. "The past has a way of catching up with us, Zara. It was only a matter of time before it was discovered." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "What is it, Kellar? What happened to that ship? Why have you kept it hidden?" Kellar took a step closer to her, his multi-limbed form almost swallowing the space between them. "It is not something I can easily explain, Zara. It is not just a ship. It is a grave. A grave." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "It was the remnants of a war," Kellar continued, his voice soft but laden with the weight of centuries. "A war we fought against our own people. A rebellion. The truth is not easy to bear. But you will understand it, eventually." Zara's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What are you not telling us?" Kellar's gaze softened. "It is not that we have been hiding the truth. We have simply forgotten it. In time all things are forgotten. But you will remember. It will be a part of the continuum that binds us. And now it must be a part of you as well." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The truth, it seemed, was far darker than she had ever imagined. Zara stood frozen in place, trying to process the weight of Kellar's words. The word grave echoed in her mind, its implications sinking deeper with each passing second. What was the Zalarian rebellion? Why had Kellar's people chosen to bury such a part of their history? This wasn't just about a ship, it was about a deep ancient wound that had been hidden beneath layers of time. And now she was being asked to confront it. Kellar remained standing in front of her, his limbs relaxed yet poised, an expression of quiet sorrow on his alien features. "You must understand, Zara," he began softly, his voice tinged with what she could only interpret as regret. "This part of our history is not something we chose to hide. It is something we have let go of for the sake of our survival." Zara nodded slowly, her mind spinning. "A rebellion? But against your own people? What happened?" Kellar closed his eyes for a moment as though gathering his thoughts. "The war that you refer to happened centuries ago, before our species discovered the power of unity and empathy that we now cherish. We were a fractured people, divided by our differences, by conflicting ideologies and ambitions. There were factions among us, fighting for control of the very essence of our society. The rebellion was a response to the ruling council's decision to enforce a form of governance that prioritized control over the individual. A significant portion of our people rejected this idea, choosing instead to pursue their own paths of freedom." Zara felt a deep sense of unease ripple through her, the thought of a civil war, one fought between the very fabric of a society, resonating with dark familiarity. She had studied human history, she knew all too well the destruction and scars left behind by such conflicts. But this was different. The Xylarians had evolved beyond those kinds of divisions, hadn't they? At least that's what they had portrayed. But now there was this hidden history buried like a long-forgotten secret. The rebellion, Zara pressed, was it truly a failure? Or was it something you, your people, decided to forget? Kellar opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. The rebellion was not a failure in the way you might think. It succeeded, but at a great cost. What followed was a great reckoning, one in which we came to realize the true meaning of our existence, not as divided factions but as one unified species. The scars left by the rebellion forced us to confront ourselves. We chose to suppress that history not because we feared it, but because it would have led us down the same destructive path. Zara swallowed hard. "So you erased the history. You buried it?" "We did not erase it," Kellar said with a soft but firm tone. "We chose to transform it. Through the continuum, we forged a new way of seeing ourselves. Touch became the way we connected not just to each other but to the past. Through touch we found a way to understand, to heal, and to rebuild. The wounds of the rebellion became part of our collective memory, not as a source of pain, but as a foundation for the unity we now enjoy." Zara's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the complex layers of Xylarian culture. This was far beyond diplomacy, it was a matter of the deepest kind of reconciliation, of reimagining how an entire species viewed its own history. The fact that the Xylarians had turned their darkest moments into a source of strength and unity was a concept both powerful and chilling. "I don't understand," Zara said, her voice strained. "You've built an entire society on the idea of unity, of connection through touch, but you still carry this weight. And now you want me to understand it, to be a part of it?" Kellar took a step closer, his presence filling the space between them. "It is not that I want you to understand. It is that you must understand. You are here in this moment for a reason. Your species is on the precipice of something great, An alliance with us, yes, but also something far more profound. You have the potential to break free from your own cycle of division just as we did. Zara shook her head, unsure of what to make of his words. We're not like you. We don't connect like this. Touch. It's not the same for us. It's not the foundation of our society. You say your history is buried, but I don't think you've really buried it. It's still there lingering. And now it's part of our history too. Kellar's gaze softened. And that is why you must feel it, Zara. You must understand the weight of our history, not through analysis or intellect, but through connection. Through the same method by which we have healed our wounds. By embracing the continuum, you will come to understand what we have lost and what we have gained. Zara recoiled slightly, her thoughts swirling in confusion. You want me to touch it? Kellar's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something like hope in his eyes. Not just touch it, Zara. You must experience it. You will not be able to see it through your human eyes alone. You must feel it in the deepest part of yourself. Only then will you begin to understand what we have become. Only then will you understand how the continuum works. Zara could hardly believe what she was hearing. This wasn't just a philosophical debate or a cultural exchange. This was something deeper, something far more personal. She had already felt the power of their touch, the overwhelming flow of emotions, memories, and experiences that came with it. But to face the truth of their past, to enter that memory through touch, it was something she wasn't sure she was ready for. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. And if I can't understand it? What happens then? Kellar was silent for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the vastness of the stars outside the ship. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but resolute. Then it will remain a barrier between our peoples. If we cannot fully connect, if we cannot share this understanding, then the alliance will falter. It is not just a matter of politics, Zara. It is a matter of the soul. This is something you must experience or else the fracture will persist. Zara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The stakes were higher than she had realized. This wasn't just about learning to understand the Xylarians, it was about bridging an existential divide. If she failed, the entire alliance, the future of human-Xylarian relations could be at risk. She had to understand, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how dangerous. You'll be with me? Zara asked, looking up at Kellar. Through this process? Kellar nodded. Yes. You will not be alone. We will guide you. You will not experience it the same way we do, but you will see it through our eyes, through our touch. That is the only way. Zara hesitated. She had always prided herself on her intellect, her ability to navigate the complex web of diplomacy and negotiation. But this was beyond diplomacy. This was raw, untapped emotion. This was an ancient wound that had been buried deep within the Xylarian consciousness. Could she really handle it? Could she allow herself to be vulnerable enough to experience it? But she knew there was no other choice. She had come this far and now there was no turning back. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice steady but her heart racing. I'll experience it. Kellar's eyes glimmered with something like gratitude, but also a deep, unspoken sadness. Then let us begin. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the air grow thick with the weight of the moment. She wasn't just about to learn the truth. She was about to live it. Zara's body was tense, her every nerve on edge as she stood across from Kellar, preparing herself for what he had promised would be an experience unlike any other. The air in the chamber felt thick with anticipation, like the calm before a storm. Kellar, his features serene and composed, extended a limb toward her, a slow and deliberate motion. This is not just an act of touch, he said softly, his voice resonating in her mind. It is an opening. A doorway into the collective experience of our people. If you wish to understand us, you must let go of your preconceptions and surrender to the flow of the continuum. Zara swallowed hard, her pulse racing. She had spent years studying Xylarian culture, learning their ways of communication and empathy, but this was something entirely different. Something deeper. The thought of experiencing their history, their pain, their triumphs through touch was daunting. She had always relied on her intellect, on facts, on analysis. But now she was about to step into a realm where none of that would matter. Do not resist, Kellar continued, his voice low and soothing. Let your mind and your heart open. The experience will find you whether you are prepared or not. It is only by accepting it that you will truly understand. Zara nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. She had no idea what she was truly getting into. But there was no turning back. If she wanted to bridge the gap between humans and Xylarians, to heal the wounds that had been buried for so long, this was the only path forward. Kellar's touch was gentle but firm. He placed his limb against the center of her chest, and at the moment of contact, Zara felt a jolt, as though her very being had been thrown into a whirlpool of sensation. She gasped, feeling her heart race as her vision blurred. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't just the physical pressure of his touch, it was as though she could feel the entire history of the Xylarians coursing through her body, their collective consciousness flooding her mind. Her breath caught in her throat as memories began to cascade through her like waves, each one crashing with overwhelming force. She saw images of Xylarian ancestors, their vibrant cities burning in the midst of conflict. The faces of those who fought in the rebellion, their expressions filled with rage and defiance. She felt their pain, their fear, their desperation. It was as though their emotions were her own, their struggles etched deeply into her being. She tried to pull away, but Kellar's touch was unyielding, guiding her deeper into the flow of their history. Her mind was no longer her own. She was lost in the continuum, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the emotions she was experiencing. She saw Xylarians at their lowest, betrayed by their own kind, torn apart by war. And then she felt the shift, the moment when the rebellion broke, when they had come together to forge something new. But it wasn't a victory, at least not in the way humans would understand. It was a brutal, painful birth of something entirely different, unity forged in the fires of destruction. Zara felt as if her very soul was being torn apart and remade in an instant. The memories were not just images but emotions, ideas, philosophies, and lives. It was all at once beautiful and terrifying. She felt the weight of an entire species' collective guilt, and yet, there was a strange beauty in the way they had turned their darkest moment into the foundation for their future. Through the chaos of these overwhelming sensations, she suddenly saw one figure, one Xylarian face, emerge clearly. A leader from the rebellion, someone whose name was lost to history but whose presence remained powerful in the continuum. Zara felt their pain deeply. This leader had been one of the most vocal in rejecting the authoritarian rule, their vision of freedom clashing with the unyielding authority of the ruling council. Yet, despite the war, despite the betrayals and the bloodshed, this leader had become a symbol of hope for the Xylarians who sought something more. The vision shifted again, and Zara was now standing on the edges of an alien battlefield, watching the final confrontation unfold. The leader was there, standing tall amidst the chaos, surrounded by others who had fought for their vision of a free Xylarian future. The battle was not just physical, it was ideological, a clash of visions for the future. Zara could feel the weight of that struggle, the desperation in the leader's heart as they fought not only for survival but for a new way of thinking, a new way of living. The leader's vision of unity was being tested, torn apart by those who could not accept it, those who clung to their old ways. Zara felt the crushing grief of that leader as they realized the inevitable. This war would not end in peace. It would end in loss. As the leader fell, Zara felt the shudder of that final, painful moment, where everything they had fought for seemed to shatter. The leader's body crumpled to the ground, but their vision did not die. It burned on in the hearts of those who survived, who carried the pain of their loss forward, shaping the Xylarian future. The battlefield dissolved around Zara, and she was left in an empty space, bathed in the silence that followed such a catastrophic loss. Her heart ached as the last vestiges of the rebellion's memory faded, leaving behind a lingering emptiness. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she struggled to regain control of herself. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. It felt as though the weight of the entire rebellion, the burden of every life lost, had become her own. She had felt their emotions, their pain, and now it was woven into the very fabric of her being. Kellar's voice cut through the darkness. "You have seen what we have been through. You have touched the essence of our history. Do you understand now?" Zara could hardly speak. The experience had left her breathless, her chest tightening with emotion. She nodded slowly, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "I understand. The cost of your unity. The price of the peace you have now. But I still don't know how this helps us, how this will help us bridge the gap between us and the humans." Kellar's gaze softened. "It is not about the gap, Zara. It is about the future. What you have experienced is the foundation of who we are, the reason why we have chosen touch as the method of connection. We have buried the past, not because it was easy, but because we chose to remember it in a way that would heal us, that would bind us together. We chose unity over division." Zara was silent, processing his words, still reeling from the emotional intensity of the experience. She could feel the weight of the Xylarians' history pressing against her, but she also felt the sense of something greater. The pain, the suffering, they had forged something more from it. Unity, connection, and an unyielding resolve to never repeat the mistakes of the past. "I think I understand," Zara said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "But, how do we move forward from this? How do we ensure that we don't fall into the same traps?" Kellar's expression grew serious, his eyes locking onto hers. "By embracing the continuity, Zara. By allowing our histories, our cultures, to intertwine, to share in each other's burdens and triumphs. This is the foundation of true unity. Not just between us but between all species. Only then will we be able to prevent the same divisions from arising again." Zara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She had experienced the Xylarians' pain, their sacrifice, their vision of a future built on unity. And now she realized, it was her turn to help make that future a reality. With that realization, a new understanding blossomed within her, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a diplomat anymore. She was part of something much larger, something far more profound than she had ever imagined. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a path she would walk with the Xylarians. And together they would build a future that transcended the wounds of the past. Zara's journey had only just begun. Zara stood at the edge of the Xylarian vessel, her mind a swirling vortex of emotions and thoughts. The continuum had changed her, transformed her in ways she couldn't fully grasp yet. The history of the Xylarians was now part of her own. She had felt their pain, their sacrifice, and their triumph. She had touched their darkest moments and their brightest hope. She understood now why they were so determined to protect their unity, to preserve the fragile peace they had fought so hard for. But understanding was one thing. Bridging the gap between two worlds was another. Kellar stood beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. His alien features were etched with the quiet intensity of someone who had lived through centuries of turmoil and peace alike. "You have felt it, Zara," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the midst of her turmoil. "You have touched the heart of our history. Do you now see the path forward?" Zara took a deep breath, gazing out into the vastness of space. She could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her shoulders, but also the immense potential that lay before her. The alliance between humanity and the Xylarians wasn't just about political treaties or trade agreements, it was about something much deeper. It was about healing, connection, and the shared understanding of pain and growth. "I see it," Zara said slowly, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I understand why the Xylarians have chosen the path of unity. But the question is, how do we get humans to see that same path? How do we make them understand the importance of what we've just experienced?" Kellar's gaze shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered her words. "The human spirit is strong, Zara. It is both bound by the weight of history and capable of immense growth. You, as a species, have the power to change, to evolve, but only if you choose to confront your past as we did." Zara felt a pang of discomfort at his words. She had spent years working with humans, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, their values and contradictions. Humanity was not always an easy species to work with. There was pride, distrust, and fear, often manifesting in a resistance to change. But there was also incredible potential, a drive to adapt and overcome. The human spirit was resilient, yes, but it was also stubborn, unwilling to embrace vulnerability without first questioning it. "The human experience isn't the same as the Xylarian one," Zara replied, her voice thoughtful. "We've had wars, yes, but we've also built a world based on different values. We don't connect in the same way you do. Our history hasn't been about touch, about empathy. It's been about division, conflict, and individualism. How can I make humanity understand what I've felt? How can I convince them that we need to embrace unity the way the Xylarians have?" Kellar turned to her fully, his expression serious. "It is not your job to convince them, Zara. It is your job to show them. You have felt what we feel. You have experienced the continuity, the connection. Now you must help them experience it in their own way. You must find the path that speaks to them, the way that human hearts can understand and embrace." Zara stared at him for a long moment, the weight of his words settling in her mind. He was right, convincing was never the way forward. The human race was too complex, too varied to be swayed by rhetoric alone. They needed to feel what she had felt, to understand through experience, not just explanation. "But how?" Zara asked, her voice a whisper, almost a plea. "How can I make them feel what I've felt? How can I show them the importance of what we've shared?" Kellar's eyes softened. "You must lead by example, Zara. You must be the bridge. You already have the understanding, the connection that transcends your human ways. Now you must create the space for others to do the same. The continuum is not just a Xylarian concept. It is universal. Touch, connection, empathy. It is at the core of all beings. You must find a way to draw it out of them. Zara nodded, the path forward becoming clearer in her mind, though still daunting. She had always been a bridge between cultures, human and alien, but this was something different. This wasn't just about translating words or negotiating deals. This was about translating experience, about showing her people the power of unity in a way they could understand. Zara, Kellar continued, his voice gentle but firm, there are many ways to connect, to share. You must be patient with them just as we were patient with you. It will not be easy, but you have seen what is possible. The rest will follow. She looked back at him, feeling a new sense of purpose stir within her. She had been chosen for this role for a reason. Her unique ability to empathize, to feel the pulse of a culture, and to translate that experience to others. This wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about healing, about showing the universe that connection was possible, even between the most unlikely of species. I will do it, Zara said, her voice resolute. I will help them understand. I will help humanity see what I have seen, feel what I have felt. Kellar smiled, a rare expression of approval crossing his features. I believe in you, Zara. But remember, it is not the destination that matters. It is the journey, the steps you take, the moments of connection that will lead the way. Do not rush. Take it one step at a time. Zara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead of her. There was so much to do, so much to learn, but she no longer felt alone. She had the knowledge, the experience, and the strength of the Xylarians behind her. She had touched the continuum, the very heart of their culture, and now she was ready to build that bridge. She turned to face Kellar, her heart steady. I won't rush. But I won't stop either. As she spoke those words, she felt a shift within herself, something deep and profound. She wasn't just a messenger anymore. She was a catalyst, a force of change. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but she knew that with each step, with each connection made, the universe would grow a little closer, a little more united. Kellar gave her one last nod, a silent blessing, before he turned and walked toward the ship's command center. Zara watched him go, then turned back toward the vast expanse of space before her. The stars twinkled in the distance, each one representing a possibility, a connection, a world waiting to be touched. She wasn't just carrying the weight of her own species' future anymore. She was carrying the hope of all those who had suffered, all those who had fought for unity. And with that weight came a sense of responsibility, one she was now ready to bear. The bridge was waiting to be built, and it would begin with her. Zara stood before a gathering of humans and Xylarians in the Great Council Hall aboard the human flagship Elysium, a vessel that had once symbolized the dominance of Earth's military forces but now stood as a symbol of cooperation. The hall was vast, a blend of human technology and Xylarian design, with curved walls of alien materials interwoven with sleek, metallic human architecture. Above, the skylight, crafted by Xylarian artisans, allowed light from distant stars to cascade down in shimmering waves, illuminating the room with an ethereal glow. This was not just another diplomatic meeting. Today she would begin the most important task of her life. What would, if successful, reshape the future of both humanity and the Xylarians forever. She could feel the weight of the moment in the air, thick with expectation and uncertainty. A room filled with ambassadors, military leaders, scientists, and diplomats from both sides, all of them staring at her. She had their full attention, but she also carried their skepticism, their doubts. The gravity of this moment was palpable. Zara stood tall, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Her experience with the continuum had left its mark. She had learned the Xylarian way, felt their history, their pain, and their vision for the future. But now she had to translate that understanding into something human, something the people of Earth could relate to. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was the embodiment of two worlds, both at odds with one another yet bound by something more profound than politics or economics. The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye was on her. She cleared her throat, gathering her thoughts. Her voice, when it came, was steady. We stand at a precipice, she began, her tone calm but firm, a moment in history where the choices we make will shape the future of our species, and possibly all sentient life in this galaxy. We are not here today to negotiate trade, resources, or borders. We are here because we have witnessed something more than just a clash of civilizations. We have witnessed the potential for unity, for understanding. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. She could see the skepticism on some faces, particularly among the human delegates. They were wary, as they had every right to be. Humans were not quick to embrace anything that threatened their perceived sovereignty or identity. But she wasn't asking them to surrender these things, she was asking them to see the potential for something better, something they had never considered before. 4 years, Zara continued, her voice growing more resolute, the Xylarians have lived with the knowledge that their past, full of conflict and division, could either destroy them or bind them together. They chose the path of unity, not by force but by understanding, by embracing the strength of connection. They chose to remember their darkest moments, not as a burden, but as a foundation for a future where peace is possible. She glanced over at Kellar, who stood among the Xylarians, his posture as serene as ever. His eyes met hers, and she felt an unspoken affirmation in the connection between them. It was as though he was reminding her that this wasn't just about words, it was about demonstrating the power of unity in action. Many of you here today know that I have experienced the heart of the Xylarian people, their pain, their triumphs, and their vision for a better future, Zara said, her gaze sweeping the room, meeting the eyes of humans and Xylarians alike. I have touched their past in a way that no human ever has, felt their loss, their resilience, and the strength that comes from shared suffering. But more importantly, I have felt the power of connection. The kind of connection that can transcend history, transcend differences, and create something new. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. I know this is difficult to understand, especially for my fellow humans. We have been taught to fight, to compete, to keep our distance from others who are not like us. We have built entire systems of governance based on division, on borders, on the idea that each group must protect its own interests above all else. And yet, I stand here today because I believe we can change that. I believe we can build a future where our differences are not barriers but bridges. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. It wasn't just a political speech. This was something more intimate, more personal. She was asking everyone in this room to consider a shift in perspective. To understand that their way of thinking could evolve, could grow. And that growth didn't have to come from fear or submission. It could come from collaboration and shared purpose. You may ask, Zara said, her voice softening, how can we build such a future? How can we, as humans, learn to embrace what the Xylarians have discovered, that unity forged through empathy and understanding is stronger than any political or military alliance? She took another breath, choosing her words carefully. It begins with connection. Not just in treaties or trade agreements but in the way we treat one another. The way we reach across the void of space not with weapons but with our hearts. The way we touch one another's pain, share in one another's struggles and build something together. That is what the Xylarians have shown me. And that is what I believe humanity can learn to do. Not by force but by choice. A murmur rippled through the room, the human delegates exchanging looks. Zara could see the internal conflict on their faces. Some were intrigued, others doubtful, but none were completely dismissive. That, she realized, was the first victory. She had their attention. And in that moment she could feel the potential for something bigger than a political agreement. This could be the beginning of a true cultural exchange. Zara turned toward Kellar, who was watching her intently. The Xylarians have already shown us the way. They have offered us their empathy, their understanding. They have taken the first step in bridging the gap between our two species. Now it is up to us as humans to meet them halfway. She stepped back, the weight of her message hanging in the air. I don't expect you to understand everything at once. Change takes time. But we have to be willing to try. We have to take that first step together. A silence settled over the room. It was as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Zara felt the gravity of the situation. This was the moment that would determine the future. She had laid out her vision, her plea for unity. Now, it was in the hands of the humans in the room to decide whether they would step forward, whether they would embrace the path of connection that Zara had proposed. After what seemed like an eternity, one of the human delegates, an older man with a stern face, stood up. Zara's heart skipped a beat. Was he going to reject her proposal outright? Was this all going to fall apart? But instead, he looked at her with a solemn expression and then turned to the Xylarians, his gaze lingering on Kellar. It's not easy to accept the idea that we are not always the center of the universe, he said, his voice gravelly but thoughtful. But I've seen enough and I believe there's something here worth pursuing. Something beyond what we've always known. Zara felt a surge of hope. The first step had been taken. The room erupted into a quiet buzz as others began to speak, their voices mixed with uncertainty and cautious optimism. One by one, humans and Xylarians began to discuss the implications of Zara's vision. This was just the beginning, but it was a beginning that carried the potential to reshape the future, not just of two species but of the entire galaxy. Zara exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders releasing. She had taken the first step. Now it was up to them all to walk the path together. As the discussions continued, Zara stood in the background watching with a quiet smile. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But for the first time she felt something she hadn't felt before: hope. A hope that the bridge she had started building, one conversation at a time, would one day become a powerful force that connected all beings across the stars. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.